Hello, everyone. My name's Yuta Jazz, and today we're coming back with another the Occult Saga podcast episode. And I felt like after the last one, there's just been an overview time for me, and I've seen other people speak about certain spiritual philosophies and ideas and what have you. Or I've heard some people finding some stuff as well and what their experience was watching that, and interesting topics about spirituality have resurfaced that are outdated and not really working. So yeah, it's been interesting time, kind of seeing what is the next episode or where I'm going with the podcast next. This one might be more of a channeling episode because I got really pulled to talk about what happens after death, which is kind of like an addition or an add-on to the episode of Reincarnation. And bear with me because I haven't actually I haven't thought about that quite a lot. I haven't thought about it in the sense of how would you relay whatever my understanding is to another person about it. And I guess I don't necessarily have that opinion pre-revved up or that view and perspective. It hasn't bounced up or around in my head enough for me to just rift and just go on and whatever. Because I haven't really thought about it to the extent of how do you explain this generally? Because even that is very particular and personal to each individual, right? What they're going to go through, how it's going to transpire, why are they going through it, etc. But since that topic has popped up for me, I have realized that, well, one thing is it's not the same for every person what happens afterwards. It's going to be different depending on who you are and your soul's age and where you're from in terms of energy, and maybe also, well, not maybe also, but indefinitely also, you're going to go through whatever backlog you still have after your life, wherever you are living, whatever reality, dimension, planet, place you're living at, right? If you still have attachments to that place, if you still have strong emotions or energy about your experiences, if you can't let go of people as well. It'll predict but there's going to be a predetermined experience for you after you're gone, because there's so many options of what a soul can choose to do after they pass. It depends on also some nuances to what extent they'll experience one thing or another. So let's say, you've had a lot of hangups and other stuff like that, you might actually struggle with passing over so much that you're going to get stuck somewhere and stay there and be a ghost about it. Or maybe you're not even aware you're dead, right? And that'll make you kind of get stuck in limbo as well. It's going to be the best way I can describe it is kind of like a person that has amnesia or dementia or like a really strong concussion, and they get taken to a completely different place and they have no idea what's happening. Imagine, I guess, that feeling, right? And just attribute it to a soul that has no comprehension or gathering that they've passed on, or that they don't need to stick around where they are, or that life isn't just set to being down here on Earth, right? That's part of life, but there's so much beyond that as well, that you could consider as life as well, right? And instead of going through the review process or whatever, they can just have a piece of them kind of lost, stumbling around and moving around in the ether and the astral and whatever you want to call it. And yeah, they can get attached to people, items, places, experiences could be replaying constantly, or those emotions and that charge can be replaying for them in a very high intensity, right? And if they meet living souls, they might actually think that they're intruding on them, or that something is happening in living life, but it isn't like in living life. And that is mainly, I guess, a symptom of just being so sucked into life, so sucked into everything that it can be for a person. Maybe having a really traumatic experience break, or a lot of them that kind of just amount onto you, and you basically, without letting it go, without knowing how to let it go, without actually working towards that, even if you don't know how to do it right, you could still be choosing to figure it out and learn about it somehow through your life. If you don't put any effort in, you're already kind of keeping yourself in place in whatever time you have experienced a lot of disruption, a lot of trauma, a lot of issues, a lot of pain, maybe disagreements with people that you love, right? And as you're carrying it, it's going to actually keep you stuck like a rock afterwards. That's a big way and a big reason ghosts are made. Sometimes there's nuances into how they could come up, really, but I feel like that's just a whole new topic, a whole new video. Um, Mostly as let's say a ghost or a passed on entity, what you'd go through is like a review process. There's a some time down where you are one being like, I guess you get brought back into the energy of all of everything, right? But you also have a review time happening either before or after that. Depending on who you are, it's going to be different, whether it's after or beforehand. And throughout this review process, you will see the impact of you being alive, the impact of you going through your experiences, what it has shaped you to be, what it has made you do, and whatever emotions and feelings you've been harboring through all of that. And the other side is going to be seeing where who is now because of your actions in life. So visiting family members, visiting friends, visiting people you don't even know well, but you've actually had an impact on, right? So going through all of the list of things on Earth that you have an attachment to, an impact on, a connection to, you've lived with, you've been a part of, all of that gets into a position where you kind of just look over it and see what's what, how it's been, and reflect on that to some extent. But also, it's more of a space where you're actually letting go any other attachments, emotions, ideas, or thoughts you might have to the process of you being down here and alive and going through that. Because each and every life is like an aspect of consciousness figuring out its own identity. It's an aspect of consciousness or energy realizing who they are on a more deeper primal and also essentially just multi-dimensional place, right? But just specifying it to a particular aspect, a particular attitude, a particular thought process program, whatever it is, right? And analyzing the micro instead of being just constantly stuck in the macro with everyone everywhere, and not knowing what to do with that. So yeah, it's going through that for, I don't know, I can't really determine, I guess, a time because for me and how I've experienced people going through this process and me either hearing about them, meeting them, or just seeing their ghosts in my room. It's different for everyone. It's just that in some places, souls really can't linger because it can mess up the process in general. It might confuse them and make them attached to something that they really shouldn't, right? And it's kind of try like it's attempted to be done as smoothly as possible, with relatively quick transitions between, oh, I'm here now, I'm transitioning now, I'm a part of like everything and I feel connected to that aspect, and now I'm actually going through, or like this part that I'm talking gonna talk about either happening before or after, right? I'm reviewing who I've been, where I've been, what I've done, and where I'm gonna keep going on. And it's also a part of, I guess, the higher self, lower self prospect of bringing back information and then plastering it on, and then also swimming with that and figuring out whatever energetical composition is happening there from your soul's journey into like the entirety of it. So yeah, that's a lot. Higher selves and lower selves is actually the episode I wanted to record after the last one, but then after listening to Reincarnation, I kind of felt like, there and then hearing some other stuff that's popping up in the spiritual community, I've really gotten to the point of like this maybe needs to go after this episode. Although I can't structure them together too well. Yeah, we're gonna cover more about higher selves and lower selves and that whole entire process and what that is and how that relates and why that's important future episodes. But a big part of it would be in this whole sense in some way or another. So a big reason I wanted to talk about where we go after passing is actually because the idea of heaven and earth really started like heaven, earth, and hell really started coming across to me. I think I'll speak about those two dimensions separately at some point on its own, but I did want to add to the previous episode in saying that heaven and hell do exist. There's plenty other spaces in between of those. There's also the ghost realm where people get stuck. That realm is more than just ghosts, but we're gonna leave it as ghost realm. And it's not a definite in some ways. In some ways, it is a definite, but in some ways, it's not a definite of where you're going to go after you pass. There's certain qualifications and circumstances and how a person can get stuck as it goes, but then there's also the same for heaven and hell, or just being in that blank space of going through reincarnation and just reflecting in like an empty room of echo. You know how people say like, "Oh, what if only emptiness happens after we die?" That's a big part of it is basically where you just go to reflect and think about things and sit in silence and solitude. And you're kind of still more or less inside of yourself and this darker, and I mean darker in a way that it doesn't have a lot of stuff happening in it or a lot of energy or consciousness. It's kind of like this still place where you are with yourself, with your energy. You're still tied to the planet as well, to its energetical reincarnation system, living system, dead system, all of it. You're connected to that, but you aren't in heaven or hell. You're more in this like chrysalis period in between of living and dying where you're kind of just being, right? And it's kind of like dreaming in the way of, or sleeping in the way of how we don't really remember what happens when we go to sleep, right? But some shit definitely always happens when we go to sleep. There's scientific evidence on people dreaming all the time, but also in general, that's where one, our brain starts like putting together and regenerating chemicals that are essential for living. That is the only time that it does that, is when it's actually in the sleep process and the body shut down and everything, right? But then there's also informationally a lot happening where data from your life, from the day, from where your internal processes get stored and reflected and refreshed upon to see how you have missed some important information. Maybe this is the missing link in this type of like work that you've been doing. Maybe this idea didn't work because you were missing that, right? Or this has happened to me. Reflect on it, like decompress, put it out in wherever I need to put it out into to free up this space within my mind in different sectors of it that might include memory, cognitive thinking, whatever, right? So I can function better. I need to have this informational downtime where things are cycling and being replaced or put back together or completely removed of. And that's basically kind of like how this I don't want to call it limbo space because limbo is another place. So in this in-between state during the reincarnation process, this is essentially what's happening. You're kind of sleeping, but you're kind of not. You're doing a lot of important other things, being on lockdown, cool down, I don't know, timeout, whatever it is. Some souls choose to do this every single time, all the time. This is their fun idea of like, let me just have experiences and then go through this like repetitive cycle until they're done. Then they start figuring out of something else. If you were, let's say, a human that has become a ascended master, which basically means you have learned all of your life and soul mission um, lessons and like purpose, or to the extent that is almost like the maximum, right? It's very high end. Maybe you have worked at really deep consciousness topics for multiple lives, and so one of them you actually ascended, you've actually realized whatever boundaries you've had in terms of consciousness or existence or life are just that. They're just boundaries that you have broken through, and now you can either ascend to heaven or other planets and incarnations, or you can choose whatever other space you might enjoy or prefer when it comes to that reincarnation cycle, like slow down, don't do anything, experience. And it doesn't necessarily need to be exactly like that, but it can be like that, It can be different variations of the same thing. You could just be hanging out in your soul house. You could have other things that you can work on in the spirit world and in the spirit realm instead of incarnations and other stuff like that. And most of the time, entities like whatever higher dimensional councils or higher dimensional entities and angels and etc., they will prefer to ask you and see if you would actually be willing to work on something that way to progress in the spirit realm and then be like another person that goes through either their own experiences in that new level or goes through specific incarnations to bring that information down to the necessary collectives that it'd be important to or necessary to. A lot of people do just go to heaven at that point and just kind of hang out and see whatever else they can do in spirit form that is more in the higher realms, right? Before they move on to having incarnations in other universes and galaxies. But really, it's in a way a free for all at this point because it does depend on the person, in what they want to do, how they want to progress, how tired they are, right? How much more lively they are, and just because like, oh, you've ascended doesn't mean you're gonna get stopped. But it might be depending on who you are, like, hey, some of your guides are going to be like, you can take a break or you can start working on this. You've been through this much already. Like, chill out, take a pause. But there is also a lot of mention on at like the current moment in time that there's a lot of incarnate ascended masters that just came back after doing a lot of work on the planet to just help, right? But also to personally have a more enjoyable and more easy experience where they get some of the things they haven't went through in previous lifetimes, right? Um, for example, they became a world-renowned medicine doctor of some sort. They've published books and they've created a lot of necessary institutions that we are now running on, but they couldn't have any time for friends or love life or other stuff, right? So they will go back to be somehow connected into the idea of like healing and betterment or communication of this knowledge and experience, but they will be focusing on also finding love and having kids and having a family life and seeing where their own career lands in between of all of that. And it's not as much of a mission as it is a free notion of I'm going to experience myself while participating here as a helper, right? And yeah, at certain levels, when you're a young soul, we're going to come back to young souls now. When you're a young soul, you depending on how you are, you might not experience much in between of lives because you need that downtime. You need to sleep, you need to rest, you need to, like, you need more space and calmness for you to come together instead of moving stuff, right, happening. And at some other point, when you're more formed, you will be meeting guides, ancestors, guardians, deities, maybe even. Certain meetings or contracts could be drafted up with either beings or councils as well for certain experiences or certain aspects of consciousness to be discussed for your life to be a part of your experience as well. Those are many topics like love, specific hangups on love, mental health issues, science, philosophy, like whatever deep topic and subject or approach you have in that subject, that is going to be something you discuss and how you can manifest it, create it, or embody it and learn that that is a part of you. And that's where most of like post living experiences really happen is connecting through and back with ancestors, guides, and etc. to see what has come up, what has happened, putting it all together somehow, and then beyond that, you can go on to planning your next journey or going to your next location in the astral, next location in the higher realms. You can, go to heaven depending if you are a person that's either subscribed to that, wants to go to that dimension, has been working on their soul's evolution to have that post-life experience, or not. It really depends at a certain level as you grow that like what do you want to do instead of what is out there, what can I do, right? Because after, let's say, all of the presets and the magazines are read, it really isn't something that you need to follow as much anymore because you have the tools and capacity and experience to be a free-willed sovereign being that is going off of their own ideas and fantasy and creativity instead of trying to follow a certain plan of development and growth to get to a point of being able to do that. So, heaven and hell. If you've ever heard of the point of like it's either heaven or hell on earth here, depending on the person that's living the life, right? Like you choose if you're having your heaven or hell experience. That's kind of a little bit of a part of it, but another part of it is just the factual side in terms of energy of like, have you been supportive of creation? Have you supported and have you been led by unconditional love? Have you studied divine truth and like natural law for the benefit of all, not just yourself? Have you taken the respect you need for yourself to hold not just harmony and balance, but to make decisions, right? To set boundaries, to take your stand, take your ground where you need to be that example, but to also just make yourself more prosperous. That's a big aspect of it too. Like, just because you're a really nice, good person, doesn't mean that you could avoid your own hell in a way. It's really a case of like you need to not create it for yourself, but then there's also universal law, which would stop certain people that have been out to get other people, that have been out there to harm other people, that have been out there to learn and gain power to destroy, cause like disharmony, issue, and pain, right? For them to not get release or satisfaction, there are rules in place so they can still keep being who they are out of free will, but also if they want to, they have the choice of then learning through that. And if they don't want to, then they can just do what they do and they'll fall into other spaces and dimensions that are more suitable for them. Some of them not necessarily hell, but some of them are just as bad as hell. And really, like, no one is stopped from going to heaven. You don't really need to prove yourself for that, right? But if you don't believe it, they'll make it harder. And if you're actually not benevolent, you are self-serving and harmful and manipulative, and all of these like dense energies of destruction, right? Um, you won't be able to function in heaven anyway. Like, regardless of what anything or anyone would think, it doesn't matter at that point because you can't have a soul that is of that caliber to align with heaven. It's just impossible. That's why some people work at aligning to heaven for lifetimes. You know, a lot of humans, that's what a road they're trying to follow to figure out. And it's a lot more. I think in some ways it's more nuanced than people imagine it to be, but it's also a lot more simple. It's it is really the essence of the soul that really matters, but also how we treat the soul. And then how we treat life here, right? It's kind of indefinite that people that are actually ascending, actually evolving, actually moving forward with universal law and natural creation and divinity, which divinity is available to everyone. It's not something that's just angelic or godly or saintly or martyrs. Divinity is a part of all of us in the point of just being like a freaking, good human being with common sense, right? Accepting your mistakes, accepting your flaws, accepting that you are good, that you have potential, that you are a part of this world for a reason. All of those, like, I guess, notions that go deeper into life philosophy of like an existential level, right? Not the superficial, like materialistic, capitalistic, or whatever approach that we have, or even the ethics and morals that we have evolved to be the idea of right or wrong, right? No, it's actually going beyond that. What is actually aligned with natural development and betterment and growth and evolution? What is against it? In terms of our views, it can be anything. Like if you ask every single person on the planet, they're going to have a different explanation of what is actual progression and development, what isn't progression and development. But in the eyes of spirit, it's as simple as love and fear and hate. And those two emotions or energies get complicated the more you look into them and attribute them to living life or to people. But when you just break it down for yourself, you can see the answer of like, oh, this is me acting out of fear and pain. So I am being more aggressive, more violent, more self-serving, and more um like non-negotiable in that stance as well, right? Whereas if we go to this side of me going with love and care and trust, I'm critically thinking, but also still acting out of the approach of doing my best, whatever the situation is, looking for answers, of accepting responsibility and accountability, of going with what is the best or better answer. Most of the time, I guess, in how society is these days, it comes across as like being the bigger, better person. But even then, if you go by that idea, then that can get taken out of context and it can become this idea of what it is yet again instead of what it actually truly is. So that's where it can get complicated and confusing, but it is like spirituality builds on this principle of you figuring out that whole truth, that whole aspect, that whole belief. If you watch movies or shows, you can see how that as an idea or philosophy plays out everywhere, right? And if you can attribute that to certain characters, you can see why their actions are the way they are. You can also even philosophize of why the creators made these characters in this specific way of going by fear or by love and passion. Regardless of what they're doing and or how they're acting, their essence, their behavior completely shifts and changes. And one energy's mistakes isn't comparable to the other energy's mistakes. ye old good hits it anyway. Um, so yeah, that principle is a huge driving force in spirituality, in reality, in the universe at the moment. It does get quite complicated the more you look into it. That's why it's good to um, work with it personally where you can, and then just don't dig in too much. Don't go down the rabbit hole too much because it can be freaky seeing the world that way in some ways, especially if you're not spiritual, right? At the end of the day, I like this saying, although I don't necessarily believe it's 100% applicable, but I still like the saying of like everyone's just doing their best. Everyone's doing their best. Everyone's doing what they can. Um, it's just through different experiences, emotions, and perceptions, right? That isn't the same in everyone's eyes. Just like love isn't the same as everyone in everyone's eyes, right? How they express it, how they receive it, what they believe it is, right? Yeah, it gets really complicated. But people can basically get into heaven by, especially if you're a human soul, right, and you haven't been there yet. You're most likely developing towards there regardless, unless you're really fighting the process and you're really going out of your way to be a like nasty individual, right? That ruins life instead of enhances it and looks to learn from it. You are on your way there somehow, some way. If you're having a tough spot with your character or personality, that's a part of it. Part of like going or ascending to higher realms is figuring out your dark side and then taking responsibility and accountability for it and understanding like, oh, this was essential for me to realize who I am, how I would act under pressure and other circumstances, and how do I choose to use my abilities and power, right? Um, God-given free will isn't necessarily what we think it is sometimes, right? And it isn't just all a test. It's just the universe being like a natural ecosystem of a body with really good antibodies and immune system. If you're a toxic, cancerous person or energy, you will be in those places that suit you and level out to you. Um, Yet again, complications in between of all of that, right? Depending on who you are and how you are. But as long as you don't choose yourself and path of alignment with all, then your chances of ascending it's slim, or it's going to take a long, long while. Yeah, you could be stuck in worlds forever. Now, with hell, it's also a real dimension. Hell is changing though at the moment, which is a weird new thing that hasn't really been a thing ever. Well, not recently anyway. And it's expanding to the point that now it's not just a place where people are going through shadow boxing or misery or suffering or torture to realize their guilt, their shame, their pain, their fear, whatever's holding them back, whatever they have chosen instead of like the ultimate truth and divinity of life, right? Where they've chosen the later of even more pain and suffering, co-creating it, recreating it, being stuck in it, being tormented by it. It's kind of a case of like in hell, it's not necessarily just punishment dished out by whatever to you because you deserve it and you haven't lived a good life. Like it's not the Christian idea of it, but for some it is. For some it's legitimately almost like a place of home because they operate with that energy of, let's say, torture, pain, suffering, and all of that, and that's just their energy, their soul. They have their own place, you know. It's kind of like they probably wouldn't want to go to heaven anyway because it'd be boring for them. But in general cases of like people who have held themselves back from either heaven or ascending or betterment or other things, right? They're just in their way. They would kind of sulk in that place through immense torture and suffering until they would get out of it themselves, just come to and transition back to wherever it'll be better for them. Sometimes they come back to life just to take a breather before they go into the afterlife again. But other times it doesn't work out that way. It's a really prolonged process because, I mean, it depends on who you are and how you view it. I guess in a way it is a case of like working with darkness and density and pain and fear is a fast road that's very turbulent, very unpredictable, very painful. Right. But it is fast in the point that you go through more and many things faster in a quicker succession. The destination or what do you call it? The result isn't guaranteed in some cases or senses to be like of the highest quality, but you get it either way. Indefinitely you get results in whatever destination it happens to be that usually you have chosen. Whatever. In general, always your guides and whoever is connected to you is always going to try and help you go towards the right direction or have the best situation, regardless of how many mistakes or pain or suffering or other things you're holding on to or whatever you have and haven't done. If you're shifting your life for the better, it's always going to be super noticeable. Super noticeable. And yeah, suffering isn't really as necessary no more. For people to stew in hell because they didn't believe in themselves, it's not necessary. All the other ones that might need to have a home there, that's understandable. But a lot of people are stuck in themselves, and so they're stuck in hell with beings that are actually very damned, very old, and what we consider like evil, I guess, right? Evil doesn't even feel like a real word to me anymore, but let's keep going. So with beings that are dense, beyond it, maybe old, maybe just in general, very, I guess, edgy in like the energy sense, like very edgy, very spiky, right? Human souls don't have a purpose to stay there and sulk in their stuff and then just get stuck there. Um, most people that have been good people and ended up there, they can get out. It's just now there's actually an introduction, more support systems and energy that is going to help that happen instead of keeping people shackled and chained down there. Um, it was believed that it was necessary for them to be there like that, and it'll all sort itself out somehow, but it doesn't really work that way, doesn't it? So yeah. It's shifting into a place where it's going to allow different levels of hell that aren't, some of them aren't actually even that dense. Like they're unpleasant, they're uncomfortable, but they're more like actual slumps in existence where you're actually like processing your problems and mistakes and issues or whatever you still have stuck in your head or in your heart about who you are and how you are inherently, what you can and can't control of yourself, right? What just happens, how life goes for you, all of those things. But it's actually like kind of like really intense therapy and figuring out how to let go of that and release it. It's like a very focused study group on how do I choose love instead of pain, because you can get addicted to either. Neither is good to be addicted to or attached to that point. But it is a case of like some beings just need that support system to evolve. And not get stuck in somewhere they don't belong. And there's a lot of changes being done for that for many different souls, not just human souls, all souls, all souls. If you haven't went to either heaven or hell in general or the ghost realm, you're going through that reincarnation little dark whatever still room where you're either alone and talking to some type of nothingness or somethingness that you can't pinpoint. Could be one being, could be just a cloud of energy. Could be nothingness, could be your guides and ancestors. Eventually, it's mostly guides, ancestors, and who I mentioned as well. But if you don't do that, you could just be going through incarnations. And if you don't go to either of those places, eventually and Earth isn't a thing no more, right? Maybe humans aren't a thing no more. You're gonna either transition to different species and different energy that is also conscious on Earth, if that was the case, right? Or you would transition into a whole different world, different beings, like whatever. It, depending on where your soul and energy is at, there will be limitations on which dimension, which planet, which race. But if there isn't a need for those limitations whatsoever because of your, I don't know, journey or something, then you can just go off into creation and see where you're going to land, what you're going to create and do about it. There's also how do you say this? Institutions, spiritual institutions in the astral, wherever you want to like imagine all of this is, where they help you plan out possible lives and possible worlds and dimensions to go to actually sort your stuff out. I feel like some of your guys is either higher selves or someone was like, "Where do I get that? I need that." Just ask for it. Just ask for it. Your guides will connect you to someone. Yes, there's some agencies that are better than others, but honestly, if you want to find it and get some help, you can find it and get some help. And you'll get the agency that works for you the best, honestly. So if you didn't know that you could do that, yes, you can. Go ahead and get some help on planning whatever it is your incarnation is about or will be because they do current or like future incarnations. They also help with overviews of past incarnations, if that is of interest to anyone. But yeah, you don't have to go to either of those places. There's plenty of in-between places. Like heaven and hell have so many different levels to them. Like they actually have levels to them. And one of the I guess beginning levels from, let's say, you transitioning from Earth to heaven, like the beginning levels of heaven are very easy to approach, and don't have high requirements at all because it's just a peaceful resting place for souls to recuperate and connect and do a bunch of things, right, together to see what is reality with no attachment, no strife, whatever, right? Instead of being like connected to the ocean, the wall, or whatever it is. Um, Now I guess the same is going to happen for hell, but there's also different versions of those dimensions from different realities and from different worlds and from different everything. Different species have their own version of it. It's not exactly the same as the oldest versions of heaven and hell in all of creation, like all of it, creation and eternity. But they're their own versions, and you can kind of go there. There's also planets that ascend, which basically a planet that's physical or an actual breathing aspect of life, it becomes like a transition version of it, which you could say like is an ether or a spirit or an energy version of it, which basically it's died and passed on into a different whole reality of experience and everything else. It's usually more eternal, usually goes for a while, and the beings also grow like beyond what was the normal lifespan previously. It's kind of like a different holding, waiting, limbo space in a way, but it's not. It's the ascended version of like yeah, the planet that once was. Earth is also supposed to have one of those when the time comes. Um, Yeah, there's many different things that you can do post death once you have it unlocked a bit more. You could go just hang out in all of the past lives and archives and ancestor homes that exist there. Some of them you will be able to connect to, others not. But there might be a case of like, oh, your ancestry has an actual like big pool of existence that is home that people go back to, right? Maybe they go back to a whole planet. Maybe they go back to their own version of heaven. I don't know. There's many different options. Maybe you're going to decide to just go through studies in the astral and you will connect through um, different beings of knowledge and study the Akash and divine scriptures and I don't know, go doing a bunch of stuff like that. I don't know, make a archaeology deck somewhere. All right. There's many different things you could do. Go to your soul house. Go on adventure. I don't know. There's not really a necessity for me to go off on a list of all of the different possibilities beyond all of that of like what you could do because there's so much you can do. I wouldn't have enough time. Oh, we're already at 45 minutes. Damn. Yeah, I wouldn't have enough time to actually say any of it. So I think this is a good place to stop it. I think I've described enough of what happens post-death, how you become a ghost, how you become an angel or get stuck in hell, or what you do with your friends that are either spirit family or not, right? Maybe they're just guides or some deities you sign some stuff with. Yeah, you could be doing a lot. There's a lot of reality and existence in spirit and the ether and the astral and the in creation in general. There's an eternity of it. But those are the main things of what humans go through, of what Earth plane experiences tend to lead to. It's not to say everything is just how I said it, and it's definitely freaking not. Um, this is what I can best describe for the current moment in time of how it relates to the collective and spirit and energy and what's I feel like important to say because of those questions of like what is, how is it, existence of us being down here. Do we die? Do we not die after we're gone from here? Like, is it just blackness? Is it nothing? Like, I wanted to, I guess, speak to the conscious conversations we have with ourselves when it's like the middle of the night and we're just, bobbing and we're just like, what's out there? Yo, like far out thoughts right now. Like, what is life, because all of us get to these questions at one point or another. And if we don't get to them ourselves, we definitely hear about them. And it's a huge conversation topic. So, yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation myself. I just wanted to make y'all, I guess, open to the conversation as well. If you want to share your opinions, thoughts, or experiences and stories, that'd be cool. You can go down below into the comment section and do that there. If you want to just show me some support and like be like, yo, get go with the episodes and do this thing, do a like or a sub or whatever it is. And other than that, I also have a link tree full of little links for you because it's a link tree and it's like the links grow on the tree, but they didn't grow there. I actually put them on there. Don't tell anyone. Anyway, I'm just being silly at this point. I appreciate you. I hope you have a beautiful week and or time with whatever you're going through, and I will see you next time. Peace.